Well, Andy, I appreciate you being on the program with me. I want to talk a little bit about our perceptions of college students and on the question of how willing they are to be generous in their service of others. I know you run a lot of programs, service programs, and are into all of that. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do on the campus?
Okay. I am the director of the University YMCA, which is on campus.
At the University of Toledo.
At the University of Toledo, exactly. We're not a gym and swim facility. As you know, we have an office in the Interfaith Center with you folks, Corpus Christi, and we run all of our programs out of that building in outreach into the community, which means that we have close to 275 volunteers on an ongoing basis.
Well, that's good, Andy, and that's why I wanted to talk with you a little bit about that, because I think there's a general perception of young people, about young people today, that they're not very involved, that they're part of the me decade, and they want to walk around doing their own things, that they're into hedonism and individualism and privatism and all those other bad sorts of words. And I think there's certainly a lot of truth to that. I mean, there are certain cultural trends, I think, which have turned people generally inwardly and worried about their own personal growth and development and getting ahead and making it in the world. After all, the job market is a scary thing these days. Our students have to be worried about getting a job. There's a lot of anxiety connected with that. So and there's no doubt that we see a good deal of this inward turning. I mean, we see that in our ministry, and I presume you see some of that also. And I think that you get a general perception in the culture that, well, all these young people are like that. Excuse me. And I think that's why I wanted to talk with you a little bit to see some sort of a wider picture. How about the apathy side of it? I presume you see that as well.
We see some of it. But the way we present our organization to the students, they know up front what we're asking them to be a part of. We have over 250 kids go to freshman camp. That's their first experience before they go to the university. Of that 250, maybe 30-40% will continue their relationship with us. Does that mean the rest of them are apathetic and don't do anything else on campus, who follow that trend of meism? I'm not sure. But the folks that do come to us are ready and willing to give of themselves. But I agree with you. The overall community perception or society's perception of the young folks is that they're very self-concerned, self-centered. The outgrowth of the 70s. I'm out for myself, do my own thing. And it carries into not in my backyard also.
Yes, I think that a lot of that does have to do with economics, as I see it. I mean, it's just not a simple matter for these students to make it these days in the economic world. And we've got college graduates who unfortunately can't find jobs, and it's often very difficult for people to do things like purchase a home and so on. And so there is a sort of natural concern along that line. I think we have to recognize that. But I'm more interested today in talking about this other more generous side of young people. I must say that in my many years in dealing with the young people, I've seen sort of a constant element of, that is, a small committed group of people who are willing to give and who have larger issues on their mind and think in terms of service and so on. I've seen that over the years. I don't really see a great change in that myself. I've always seen a core group of people in my own ministry willing to give of themselves and to do so quite generously.
I see our circle just getting bigger and bigger and bigger every day. It may be that the pendulum is beginning to swing back, which would be just great news. Maybe also we're asking people, we're just flat out saying, would you like to be a part of this? You are good at this. You have something to give. Would you like to share? Every week we have, like I said, over 275 students who give weekly service to the community in a variety of ways.
That's remarkable.
It's beautiful.
I think that you touched an important point there in the society as a whole, and that is the idea of personal contact and asking people or giving them something clearly that is important for them to work on. And there's studies of parish life in the Catholic community that show that a very high percentage, about 3/4 of the people who are involved, got involved because somebody came and personally asked them. Up till that point, they knew they had some talents and gifts, and they knew there was a need, but putting those two things together was very difficult. But if someone came up to them and said, look, we need help, you have a particular gift here, would you be willing to give us a certain amount of time? Very often the invitation has to be circumscribed in order for it to be effective. In other words, if it sounds unlimited, like, it'd be like me asking you to do this show with me, Andy, and then saying, well, after you do one, will you do another one,
You already lost the bet on that one.
Yeah, but in other words, if I ask you to do one, it's more likely than with a busy person like you than if I say you got to do 8 programs and I'm going to ask you next week to do 4 more. It's less likely I'm going to get that from you. So it does seem as though there has to be a certain circumscribed area that we ask people to be involved in. Do you find that in dealing with students?
Absolutely. We have 15 different programs that we run out of the University YMCA. Each one of those programs has a volunteer student director. We spent a lot of time training them, developing job descriptions, developing their program goals, so that when they approach students, they know exactly what they're asking them to do and what the students can expect from their involvement, and the most important thing, what kind of impact they can have on the people that they're going to be working with.
Now, there's an important point, it seems to me, that impact idea. I believe that people are interested in making a difference, especially talented people and people with particular gifts and people who are self-confident. They want to make sure that they aren't spinning their wheels or just spending time in activities that aren't going to make any difference. So that I like that point you make. You have to be able to show people they can make a difference in the world. And that's a major thing to sell, isn't it? I mean, our society has so many needs. The culture has so many distortions in it, and we have to be able to feel that we can make a difference in the world. And that's very hard because the problems are so complex and difficult, and you have to have a starting point, I think, to sense I can actually do something.
We have 22 students that work with second graders at Sherman School, which is indeed a Central City school, and they spend time with those kids weekly, helping improve their self-esteem, just by helping those kids communicate what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what's happening to them. And when you have a student who comes from a rural area, coming down to the Central City, spending time with a little kid, sharing their feelings about when they saw their uncle getting murdered, when their dad got arrested for trying to lift a pumpkin so that their kids could have a pumpkin for Halloween. It's a real education for those students.
And there you have a good two-way street, and I think that's probably another important thing to think about in terms of getting volunteers and getting people involved in helping others. That is, it's not always a matter just of giving, but also of receiving. That people who do it in a genuine way and really reach out to others and remain receptive very often are enriched in surprising ways. And you can sort of see in the example you use there. Now, I mean, we think that the students that you send there really do perform an important service. They can think they can make a difference. But I think primarily because they can see the results like on a one-on-one thing. I mean, they can get to know a person, and it's a great satisfaction in life to say, well, this person who has a face and a name and who I know personally is really doing better because of something that I did. So I'm seeing two things there that I think maybe we could expand upon, but that is a very precise contribution that's being made that brings personal satisfaction. You're able to say, yeah, I'll do that because I feel good about it. It enriches my own life.
We spend a lot of time identifying the issues in the community that we think the students need to become aware of, because when they become as old as you and I, Jim, they're going to be in a position to have direct impact on those situations when they make decisions in their businesses and in their personal life and in their charity work. So we take time to say, let's get them educated, let's let them know what that drug community is really like and the impact it's having on the young kids. We are raising a whole lost generation. Most of these kids are being raised by grandparents. Now, where are the grandparents going to be for their kids? Because those are the people who are using drugs now, which is going to have a huge impact on child care and a lot of other national issues in the next 20 years.
So a big part of what you're saying there is that it is a proper assessment of the culture and of the community life, the local scene, so that we know what the needs are, and you can target those and figure out exactly what might be done to improve the situation.
Exactly. You know, the other program that Corpus Christi and the YMCA worked on, and Toledo Campus Ministries back in the 70s, was a generation exploration, putting students and elderly residents of the community together for mutual sharing and caring. That's still important today, because in the next 20 years, the elderly population is going to be one of the largest populations in this country. Again, you know, something that no one is going to be able to turn their back on and say, not in my backyard. It's going to be there facing everyone.
For sure. I liked your linkage too, Andy, with the future. In other words, if we can deal with the young people and give them an experience this way, then they're going to be more attuned to the problems and have a sense that they are responsible for it. That surely should be part of education these days, and that's why it's important to offer many opportunities. I think it is that hands-on thing that really teaches people. You could study in a class all day long about inner-city students and their problems with learning and their difficulties in the drug scene and so on, and you get a sort of abstract conceptual knowledge of it, but to meet them and to be on the scene, you certainly know it in a new way. I was talking to a young woman not long ago who said that, you know, that to her that was the key that made the difference, is the actual involvement, so that she could see firsthand the problem areas and do something instructive about it. Up till that point, it had all remained sort of abstract for her. To make it concrete and personal and real is the very stuff of involvement. It's what moves us, touches the heart as well as the head, I think.
And yet, as professionals, we also need to be tuned in that everyone is not ready for that personal contact. And we are very conscious about developing programs in a step-ladder approach. You know, take Volunteers for Action, for instance. They took shopping carts legally around the dorms, asking people to give clothes and food for the homeless and for the hungry during Christmas. That's the first step to involvement. You know, the next step would be maybe coming to a party with the folks who received the goods. You know, you really have to be careful not to overwhelm folks, because they're nervous about contact. How much am I going to learn here? How much am I going to be threatened? We have to be aware of that and sensitive. And just because they don't want to jump right in and have that one-on-one contact, we don't say, forget you. They still can have an experience, and we can build upon that with them.
Step by step, in other words, a sort of greater involvement as you go along, but making sure that the opportunity or the challenge that you're facing is somehow based in a confidence, a self-confidence that I'm ready to do this or to make this step. Yeah, that sounds very wise.
They really grow from the entire experience. And it's not just an adjunct to their educational experience. It is also a spiritual experience. A lot of them get in touch with how they feel about God and their place and their role in the world. And they heard it in Sunday school, and they went to church, and they hear it. Now they're living it in a way that they've never lived it before.
Yes, an important theological point with all of that, I suppose, and that is that the love of God is rooted in the love of neighbor, that we really only know God in and through this world, and one of our great revealers of the gracious mystery is our other people, and especially the hurting and the needy. And so we go back to Matthew 25, and where Jesus identified himself with those who are down and out, with the hungry, the thirsty, the homeless, and so on. And so I always find it interesting that in that Matthew 25, that the good people don't recognize they did it for Christ either. He says, well, you did all these good things for me. And they said, well, when did we see you hungry or thirsty? And Jesus says, well, when you did it to the least of my brothers or sisters, that's when you did it to me. So the interesting lack of identification, and I suppose that what the religious traditions try to do is articulate that and name it and say it is precisely in the caring of these other people that one is going to find out who God is, that there's a primacy given to practice of the faith. It's in the practice that we come to know what it is all about. As Jesus again said that, it's the love of God, love of neighbor, love of self that's interwoven and is sort of the center point of what the gospel is about. So I think that spiritual dimension, it's well to bring that out and to remind people that it is precisely in the service of others that they serve God. Of course, it's a striking thing in the Scriptures, isn't it? If you say you love God and hate your neighbor, then you're a liar. I mean, it comes on like gangbusters to challenge that sort of dichotomized thinking that people sometimes fall into. So I know one of the things that we've tried to do is to get explicit reflection on that. I know after we had some of our students went to Appalachia and tried to help out during the break. It's good for people to know as well that not all students go to Florida and party over break. There's a lot of them who go and help out the poor, and we always have a contingent that goes to Appalachia and tries to do something and helpful for people. And one of the things that we've tried is to bring the group back and to have one of the persons in the group tell what happened to them very clearly, explicitly, like, well, we went to this woman's house and we met her and she talked about this and that and from her past, and we listened to the stories and this happened, and to sort of do what I call theological reflection on that. That is to ask ourselves, well, how was the Lord present in all of that? Did prayer play any role in it for you? Did you think of this as any kind of ministry or service? What did you yourself get out of it? Did you thank God in any way for the experience? Was there ways in which there was something deeper going on than met the eye in this experience? Was there something we might call the gracious mystery at work in all of it? So that sort of theological reflection would be designed to take that a step forward and to see this, as you pointed out, this spiritual dimension that's there.
That is so important for the students. They are hungry for that kind of reflection. Many people feel that, geez, I just asked them to give their time. That's enough. I can't ask them for any more. But the people are hungry to find out and reflect on what they've learned, what they might have gained, on the bigger picture, the whole religious aspect of the experience. Students today, I'm finding, are more hungry for that than they were 15 years ago when I was working with students before.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a real hunger to want to be learned.
That's probably in the culture as a whole. We live such busy lives and fast-paced, and it seems like a rat race, and we're constantly pulled and tugged in terms of our time and energy. And a lot of us don't have the time we'd like to step back and to say, what's it all about, or why am I doing this, or is there any meaning in this rat race, or did I really make any impact on people, or what did I receive, or did I find a mystery dimension in all of this activity? I'd say a lot of us have trouble doing that because we live such fast-paced, demanding lives. And so I think our young people are probably reflecting the whole cultural trend there and saying, wait a second, it all moves too fast. You need to stop action. I often think of liturgy that way, the stopping to worship as a chance to sort of stop the action for a while and to rerun it and to look at it again and ask ourselves, what's it all about and what role ought I play? And there's also a sort of a moral dimension in that, is how could I do it better? I mean, how could I be more respectful for the people I serve towards them, and how could I be more sensitive and more charitable and so on?
We see a lot of prejudices falling by the wayside as people work. Not only prejudice of the folks that they're working with, but also the prejudices that the individuals have about themselves. They learn that they are a giving person. They learn that they are an okay person. And we try to help them not just to rely upon us to provide them with that reflection time, but to give them, some tools, for lack of a better word, to take home with them when you wake up in the morning. Visualize how you want to be that day. When you go to bed, reflect upon what you gave or what you received that day and give thanks.
Yeah, and both things are important. I think that reception side is extremely important in all of this. I think that when we look at a lot of the programs, to go back to the one you suggested about the tutoring and dealing with the inner city students, I'm sure that very often the students would say, well, the collegians, that is, say, I got a lot out of that. I learned from those people. And especially in dealing with the old people as well, because, I think they do have a wisdom. We've lost that tradition in the culture of that older people have accumulated something. They have experience to draw on, and it's nice to listen to them. In the fast-paced world, again, people often don't get that opportunity. They don't live in extended families, don't have the grandparents around, and then they go to the nursing home and spend some time there, and if they're able to listen, there is an accumulated wisdom that can be passed on. And it's very easy to blow that off and think those people are out of it and past their prime and have nothing to give. But I think our students find that when they do give them an opportunity, and if they listen well, they really do get something in return.
One of the things that we're going to try to do this quarter is to take current issues and ask our older friends to reflect upon that in terms of their lifetime experience. They can give such a insight and a different slant on it than we can with our limited perceptions of the way the world is.
That's wonderful. What would be an example of that?
I think the falling of communism in Europe
okay.
will just be fascinating for the students. It's having a huge impact on me and the college students, seeing the wall visibly come down. I notice those that I know who fought in World War II are not as emotional as we are, because we grew up with the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
You know, other folks knew the world when it was gentler and kinder,
mm-hmm.
to borrow a phrase.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to hear what their perceptions are. You know, we see attitudes, and we're not sure we understand why those attitudes are there. Let's find out. Let's ask questions. Let's find out what their history is and their perceptions are. I mean, these folks came from outhouses all the way to saunas.
Yeah.
They have seen the world as
we
no one
shouldn't
else
lose
has.
that, right?
Absolutely.
Hang on
Absolutely. To that. We want these folks to also make audio diaries for their families,
mm-hmm.
you know, and give them to the families as a gift. You know, here's your heritage.
Yeah.
You know, take it with you and learn, and learn from that.
That's a wonderful idea, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you're right, and I think people after their loved ones died, the older ones often look at, I wish that we could ask them this, or what about our family tree, or what about this story from the past, and how did the grandparents come over here from Europe, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Often questions like that then there's no way to answer that.
No.
And so to keep the heritage alive really seems important. And it gives, maybe that's a way to get our young people interested in history. Often say, they've lost a sense of history. Maybe that's a way of doing it. The oral history, the living history could be of great interest to them, I think.
Sure, and it's not only with just those folks. You know, as I said, the Central City kids that we work with have no idea what the Civil Rights Movement and Martin Luther King Jr. is all about. You know, and we can help them with that history and cultural richness as well.
It's often difficult for us to remember how, these collegians were dealing with what they didn't live through. I mean, it's often surprising, isn't it? I mean, so many people in the culture can remember exactly where they were when President Kennedy was shot, and our young people, this is ancient history to them. And Martin Luther King, you think about that now. They have no lived remembrance of that, of his life and his speeches and his assassination. So you're right. You have to keep resurrecting that and keeping it alive.
Our 7-year-old daughter was reading a book about Martin Luther King. She needed to do a report, and she's reading about the Rosa Parks, the bus, the first step for the Civil Rights Movement. And my daughter's going, "This is disgusting. You mean they had to get up and they couldn't ride on the bus? They couldn't drink at the same drinking fountain?" I mean, she had no idea that this ever existed. And you're right, it's good to remind our folks where we have come, but where we were.
You're talking about the students going to the inner city and maybe dealing with black students who would not in themselves have any notion of that directly. And I remember when Ralph Abernathy talked on campus at the university, he was trying to keep that sort of memory alive and recalling that the young people didn't know that and sort of how far people had come and the struggles that were made, and let's not leave that be in vain in some way. It's vitally important to keep that alive and to work with it so that we're true to the memory of the people who did the struggle. I think a lot of us are sons and daughters of immigrants, first or second generation, and it's important for us to remember the sacrifices those people made to come over here.
Yeah.
So all of that feeds into this idea of volunteerism, doesn't it? And our collegians, and and the fact that they often are generous in this. They do a lot of giving, and the programs you were on, I think, are marvelous along that line. And I guess the point we're making here is they also get something back,
Yes.
and they receive. It's a mutuality. So I think it is always dangerous in any situation to think, I've got these great things, I'm going to give them to somebody. It's more of a sharing, a mutuality, and an equality. If we go in with that in mind, I think we got a better chance of good things happening.
And that's the way everything is designed, to make sure that that happens, because when it doesn't work. Yeah. The other thing, Jim, that's important is not only just bringing the different cultures in America together, but we're talking about appreciating, the impact that we can have. Our world is getting smaller and smaller, and we need to bring the students closer together with the entire world. And we at UT are very fortunate because we have such a large international population, and we need to start tearing down some of those walls as well, internally and worldwide, for mutual understanding. We may act different, we may speak different, we may eat different, we may dress different, but the basics of humans are the same, and we need to appreciate that from one another. So we're working at that too. We're really going to make a conscious effort.
Well, that's a good step forward, I think. Well, Andy, we've been talking about young people here and trying to deal with the general perception that in the culture we have nothing but hedonism and privatism, individualism, and apathy. And our experience dealing with young people suggests, well, we still have a core of people who are committed to a life of service, who are getting experience in reaching out to others, and that this is really, a helpful thing. And so I think I see that as a great message of hope. And then I think the spiritual dimension that you brought out is really important, that in our religious perspective we see this as a way of reaching out to God. This is the way we love God, by loving our neighbor. And if we're able to reflect on that a little bit, then we're able to deepen the whole process and I think become more effective servants and better able to reach out and to help others.